Here are the supplies we need to make this cute initial washcloth mitt. First, you're going to need a letter, and you're going to need it in reverse. You can use any alphabet that you like. If you are a member of Sew with Tara Reid, you can find the entire alphabet and just these block letters in the membership area. I'm going to be using a C for my little great nephew Connor. Then you need a washcloth. I'm going to be using Heat and Bond Lite Sewable. It's an iron-on adhesive. It's very light, so it's not going to make the letter really stiff on there. I'm going to use a tonal fabric, a solid or a texture, but something that's not super specific, like chickens, is going to work better for this project. Then fabric scissors, iron, pencil, sewing machine. You're going to need to be able to zigzag, and that's about it. So let's get started. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the letter that I want to use. Actually, I don't even have to do that because we were going to trace it, but it's already cut, so die is cast. I'm going to get my Heat and Bond Lite. Now, this is an iron-on adhesive, so it's shiny on the one side. That's the part that's going to stick. And then the other side is paper. So I'm just going to trace the letter C onto the Heat and Bond Lite Sewable. Not totally perfect, but it is definitely good enough. I'm just going to cut that little piece out. No matter what kind of product you're going to use to get your letter onto the fabric and then onto the washcloth, you want to make sure you follow the directions for how to adhere it. Place this on the back of the fabric, which is why we needed this in reverse. And then we're just going to press down for about 2 seconds. Now we want it to cool a little bit and make sure that that is stuck, which it is. And I'm going to take my fabric scissors and I'm going to cut out the letter C. So now we have our C that is going to be appliqued onto the washcloth that we are going to turn into a washcloth mitt. So let's look at our washcloth next. Now, not all washcloths are square. This one has bigger ends on 2 sides. Some of them are the same on all 4 sides. So it just really depends on what your washcloth looks like for how you're going to be putting it together. Because I have this nice finish, I want that to be at the end, like where my hand goes in. So I'm going to turn it over. So this is obviously the back because you have the folded over and you have the tag, which I'm going to cut off. And I'm going to fold it in half with this part at the bottom. Now, just to make sure it's going to work, I'm going to put my hand in there. Make sure there's going to be enough room, even with a 1/4 inch seam. Yep, that is going to be good. I'm going to cut this part off. And so I'm going to just sew it straight. But if you want it to be a little fancier, you could also cut a curve and sew a curved mitt. This is how the mitt is going to be. And we're going to lose about a 1/4 inch. We want the letter C to be pretty much centered. So you want to put it a little bit closer to the folded side than this side, because again, seam allowance. And then you can decide how far up you want it to be. I'm just going to put it, maybe it's 1.5 inches from the trim. I think that is going to be a nice spot. I don't know how I forget this, but sometimes I forget to peel the paper off of the back of my piece. So you want to peel that gently so that the adhesive still stays on the fabric and doesn't come off with the paper. And you'll know that that has worked because it will make it shiny. And quilting fabric is not shiny unless it has something stuck to it. No steam, press down. And this is going to take a little bit longer to adhere to the terry towel because it is thicker and bumpier than it did to adhere to the quilting fabric. So I'm just going to leave that on a little bit longer. Now this doesn't have to be stuck for dear life because it's not the only way it's going to be sewn onto here. We are going to zigzag around, but having this adhere pretty well is what is going to hold it in place as you do your zigzag. I forgot to mention using a stabilizer when we were talking about the supplies. This is a water-soluble stabilizer. It's just a thin film that I'm going to put on the back of the towel behind the letter. It is going to help the sewing machine move more easily than if we tried to zigzag just with this. Because it's so bumpy, it's a little harder for the feed dogs to move around, especially with such tight curves. So I'm just going to cut that a little bit bigger than the C so that I can pin it in place. So I'll just turn it over, make sure the pins are on that. Good to go. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to do some zigzag. If you are new to zigzag stitching and applique, zigzag is basically a stitch that just goes back and forth, and you can make it go back and forth really close together or further apart. For something like this, where we're sewing all the way around the edge, I like it to be pretty close together and sort of wide. Look at your sewing machine manual to see how to make that change. I'm going to do about 4.5 wide, and then I'm going to make it a 0.75 distance. It's a good idea to test the length. I'm also using a red top thread and a blue bobbin thread so that it's going to be matching the C on the top and then the blue on the back. So let's just see how close and wide that is going to be. It's not super close, but it's definitely going to be close enough. You don't want to go too close when you're sewing on a towel, because it gets a bit more difficult. This is going to be good. Now you'll also notice with the foot, it is wide open here and you can really see what is going on. So if your machine has a foot that is specific for applique, you want to use it. That doesn't mean there aren't other feet that can work. Like this one could work because you can see it has a wide area here, so the needle can go back and forth. But look what happens when we put that down on the fabric. It is a lot harder to see what's happening as that foot would be moving. So use the best foot that you have for applique. Now mine is going to start, the needle is going to go down on the left side. So I'm putting it so that it is going to go down inside the fabric. Then I'm just going to take one stitch. I want to make sure that when it goes down on the right side, it's going on the outside of the fabric. That is how you're going to stop this fabric from fraying. You're basically encasing it in this zigzag stitch. Now, when you get to a point, like when we get down here, you always want to stop with your needle down on the right-hand side, which is the outside, and then you're going to lift your foot and pivot. Okay, so I went slightly beyond. I have it stopped on the right-hand side, and each letter is going to be a little different for how it's going to work for doing the applique part. Now I'm going to go just straight a stitch or two. I need it to stop on the right though, because I didn't want the stitching to go off of the C. So if I kept going forward, the right-hand side would go into the fabric. So I'm just gonna have to keep stopping and pivoting to get this inside curve. Now initials that just have straight lines are gonna be a lot easier, but then there are also some with more curves like an S or a P that has very tight curves that is going to take a lot more up and down. And it just really takes patience and paying attention and going slowly. See how easy that was? And it looks amazing. Now that we have the C appliqued on there, we are going to fold this right sides together. So basically hide our C. And then I'm going to just turn this and I'm going to cut off this top edge. Just making sure that my cut is going to be parallel to the fold and to this side. Then I'm going to clip here and down this side. Now you'll notice the only raw edge that we are going to have to deal with is on the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch from the edge and then right next to this trim. And then I'm going to come back and use your zigzag feature again to really just kind of encapsulate that on the top. So back to the sewing machine. Now I have a walking foot on because that is going to make it move a lot better because the towel is quite thick. And I'm also going to be using leader fabric. Leader fabric is just small pieces of fabric, and I've just folded fabric and made little loops and zigzagged them so that I can use them over and over again. It's basically a fabric that you're going to butt up to the end to help your sewing machine get going. See how that's now even. So you're going to put it under here, and then you're not going to sew on those. You're going to sew on the terry towel, but when you put the foot down, it's going to stay flat. It's not going to be tilted, and so that is better for the longevity of your machine. And it's also going to help get you moving faster, less likely to get big old snarl knots, etc., etc. This is going to be a little bit more than 1/4 inch because I want to make sure I am on the terry cloth and not this finished edge of the washcloth, but I want to keep that finished edge so I have less potential fraying when I'm using this. Now that is a huge lump and it's doubled up. So I'm just gonna try and sew to the edge of it and not try and get over that, because that is just the potential to break your needle and not worth it. It's gonna open a little bit on the end. You could hand stitch that, or if you wanna try and get your sewing machine over that, you can. I'm just going to leave it like that. Now I'm going to change my foot again so that I can zigzag over this edge to stop it from falling apart and fraying everywhere. If I had done a curve, I just would have done the same thing and zigzagged on the curve. And now it's done. All we need to do is turn it right side out, and we have a really cute washcloth mitt. And I really think this is going to be so much easier if you've ever tried to bathe a toddler. They're moving around and playing with toys, and sometimes just having this big washcloth that you're trying to hold and keep on your hand and flop around is difficult. So having something where you can just put your hand in it and do that. This can also be something that you can let the kids play with and teach them to start washing themselves too. It would be great with a hooded towel. So check the links below this video for some of the hooded towel tutorials that I have done as well. And you can make a towel and a washcloth to match. Happy sewing and keep clean.